Good evening. It's April 25th, 2024, and welcome to one of our branches on the vine with the Bible Project and the Sermon on the Mount series. So the Bible Project created this series to cover the entire year. Every 5 weeks, they're going to release another episode, and we're going to take some time to discuss each of these videos and the creative topics that are presented. The videos are going to be discussing, they're just the tip of the iceberg. They're part of a learning series that I highly recommend, and they can all be found the Bible Project app. The link for that is in the description. So welcome this evening to episode 4 of the Sermon on the Mount, Why Jesus Connected Anger with Murder and Lust with Adultery, on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, then click the subscribe button. The reminder, that just helps you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, that's when you click that like button, because that is the way that YouTube chooses to share these to more people, if they wish. So this sermon, again, is found in Matthew 5-7, and for me, it's the seminal moment in the teaching of Jesus. This is his longest, deepest, widest teaching we have recorded in all of Scripture. And it covers things that we love to talk about, but deep down, really have challenges living. So the Sermon on the Mount, episode 4. Why Jesus connected anger with murder and lust with adultery. And for us, this is part 1. So let's watch the video and see where it takes us. Enjoy.
Imagine a world where everyone treats each other with dignity and respect. And when problems do arise, everyone works hard to do right by each other.
In the Bible, this way of treating each other is called doing righteousness.
And it sounds great, but how are we supposed to know how to always do right by others?
Well, Jesus, like any Israelite teacher, believed that you can learn righteousness through studying God's wisdom that's found in the ancient scriptures, the Torah and the prophets.
So studying things like the laws that God gave ancient Israel.
Exactly. Jesus believed that God's wisdom can be found within those laws if we meditate on them.
Ancient laws can teach us how to do right by each other today?
Yes, and let's watch how Jesus does it here in the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus will first quote a command from the Torah, and then second, he'll reveal God's wisdom underneath the command.
Okay, let's jump in.
All right, he starts with a pretty intense topic, murder.
Jesus begins, "You have heard that it was said to the ancients, 'You shall not commit murder.'"
He's quoting from the 10 Commandments here.
"And I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be guilty in the court. And whoever says to his brother, 'You good for nothing,' will be guilty in the high court." Wait, so Jesus is equating anger and name-calling with murder?
He got your attention, didn't he?
Yeah, but obviously murdering someone is worse than just getting mad and calling someone a name.
Sure, but that's not his point. Jesus is provocatively showing how murder, anger, and verbal abuse, they're all surface manifestations of something that is way deeper.
Which is?
How much you value or don't value someone's existence.
I see. Like murder is the ultimate way of saying that someone's life doesn't matter.
And so is losing your temper or belittling someone. These all reveal an attitude of superiority and contempt for the life of another person. It wreaks havoc in our relationships and communities, and it's worthy of serious consequences.
So the wisdom of this command is about way more than just murder. For Jesus, this command is about treating everyone as valuable.
Right. Jesus wants us to see that any time we demean or devalue other people, it's a failure to do right by them. His definition of righteousness means treating everybody as a fellow image of God.
Okay, the next case study is about adultery. "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'
Again, quoting from the 10 Commandments here.
And I say to you that everyone who keeps on staring at a woman in order to stir up sexual desire, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart." Okay, so Jesus isn't talking about merely finding someone attractive.
No, he's talking about the long, creepy stare, objectifying someone, looking at them like they exist for your own pleasure. And when we do this, we are stripping a fellow human of their God-given dignity, even if we keep our hands to ourselves.
In fact, this is so serious to Jesus, he goes on to say, if your eye or hand is causing you to sin, cut them off. I mean, really?
Jesus was the master of hyperbole. I mean, he just said the real problem is in our hearts, not our eyes or our hands. But he's trying to make clear that the stakes are really high.
Yeah, well, he succeeded.
It's important to remember that Jesus was raised on the Hebrew scriptures, which portray sex as a beautiful thing. But if sexual desire is driving us to dishonor the image of God in others or in ourselves, if it's causing breakdown in our relationships, it's actually ruining us, and we need to do whatever it takes to deal with it.
Well, this doesn't get any easier because the third case study is on divorce. Jesus says, "It has also been said, whoever sends away his wife, he must give her a certificate of divorce." What's going on here? Sending away his wife?
Yeah, in Jesus' day, only Israelite men could initiate a divorce, and that imbalance led to all kinds of problems.
But divorce was allowed.
It was, though only one law in the entire Torah addressed the issue, and Jesus just quoted from it. The law said that if a man initiates a divorce, he has to do it in the proper way and for a legitimate reason.
Okay, so what's a legitimate reason?
Well, this was actually a hot debate in Jesus' day. According to some Torah scholars, this law allowed for divorce only in the case of adultery. But other Torah scholars argued that the law allowed a man to divorce his wife for any reason, even dissatisfaction with the marriage.
Okay, so here Jesus enters into that very specific debate.
Right. Now, if a man could threaten divorce for any reason, that would make it easier for him to abuse his wife. And so to protect women, Jesus sided with those who limited legitimate divorce to cases of adultery. And he makes this clear when he says,
"And I say to you, any man who sends away his wife, except for a case of sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery." Okay, and what does that mean? Makes her the victim of adultery.
Yeah, Jesus is being provocative again, saying that if a man divorces his wife for an illegitimate reason, because he's tired of the marriage or just wants to be with somebody else, his marriage covenant is actually still intact.
And that means that any new marriage is an act of adultery.
Right. But notice, Jesus explicitly assigns blame to the men in his culture because it's their selfish choices that are forcing women into these vulnerable situations.
And you can see how this could play out in a society where only men can initiate divorce for any reason. This could normalize the oppression of women on a large scale.
Totally. In his cultural context, Jesus' statement protects and elevates the dignity of women as images of God.
But what about other ways a marriage covenant can be violated, like neglect or abuse? Would those be legitimate reasons for divorce?
Yeah, those are really important questions that Jesus doesn't address. His focus here is on how this one debated divorce law in the Torah was being twisted and misused by the men of his day.
How they were treating women like objects that could be discarded, like it's no big deal.
But for Jesus, the marriage covenant is designed to create interdependence and mutual respect so that the two can reflect God's image together as one. And that leads us back to the main point of all three case studies. Jesus is showing how God's wisdom in these commands, it's aimed at our core desires and motivations that affect how we treat people.
Someone could strictly follow these rules about murder, adultery, and divorce, but still dishonor and objectify people in other ways.
Right. For Jesus, real righteousness and wisdom means treating every human like they have ultimate value.
Yeah, if we valued others that much, imagine what kind of world we could create.
And that's exactly what Jesus had in mind. His announcement about the arrival of God's heavenly kingdom here on earth, it was meant to reshape our imaginations. God's wisdom invites us to honor the image of God in every person that we meet.
We just looked at 3 case studies that illustrate Jesus' vision of doing right by others and fostering healthy relationships.
Next, we'll look at 3 more about keeping your word, responding to injustice, and how to treat people that you can't stand.
So, what'd you think? It interested me when I started thinking about this, and I heard in this video, right, the word righteousness. You know, we attach a lot of baggage to that word, and I think it doesn't deserve to be hung on that word or carried in that bag. But I tried to think, does the word righteousness, or its understanding that we have, does it change over Scripture? As in, is it a word that is meant to evolve? And I'm not sure it is. It's just one of those things to ponder because I wanted to go back and look and see where else we've seen righteousness mentioned in Scripture. And for sure, one example stands out fairly strong because it's Abraham. Because Abraham was called righteous by God. And again, I don't think this is a hat that he dons or a badge that he wears or some card that he carries deep in his wallet. As in, I'm a card-carrying righteous person. But maybe I think we see with him that he lived a life that caught God's eye. Catch what I got there? That he caught God's eye because God saw him. You know, and we have at this point Abraham living that life, at least with his point, and like Tim and John are saying, Abraham is doing right by others. I like where they went with the term righteousness, that it's a word that at times folks might see as mysterious, nebulous, right? But when viewed through the lens of doing right by others, it has a bit more substance. So with Abraham, living life, honoring God, and from that, we can see that in Scripture because it's Yod-He, Vav-He. It's his only God in a region where many other gods existed, and he was doing right by others. And doing right, it's interesting because we look and see his life, and to be fair, was it done perfectly? And I'm not sure. I mean, no, it wasn't 100%. Because, we have Hagar. Not so good a deal, but we do have some very good examples. One of them is Lot. It's probably the loudest, brightest example. There's a lot in the Lot story, and pun again, and we're not going to get into all of that today, but everything from taking on his dead brother's son to the way Abraham did his best to take care of and keep Lot safe, well, that speaks a lot into Abraham's character. Tim and John mentioned that the wisdom guidance in Torah, that it does just that. It tells us what it looks like to be doing right by others, right? Because Torah was supposed to be, like we mentioned before here more than once, it's a constitution, if you will, the rules for the land of Israel. This land was supposed to be an example. These people were supposed to show the world what doing right by others looks like. And I just want to throw this in the mix. Have you ever stopped to think that doing right by others includes being an example of the God you serve and how you serve him? The example they were was how they were supposed to have lived. It was not about it being a robust infrastructure, a series of interconnected cities, a place of shiny new buildings. But it was a place for the world to look in and see the example of how doing right by others can be done. Torah is the foundation of that. It's the base. It's the beginning. Because righteousness, doing right by others. We see that echoed in the entire Torah, all 613, because I've yet to find one that doesn't reflect that. If you do, please let me know. But as Tim and John begin to broach this righteousness thing, these next 6 topics, I think the words they used were case studies, yeah? Because they're beginning to broach the subject of a heart issue. What's going on inside, right? Underneath. So as they approach this, something came to me. It's a phrase that I've heard and I've been taught a bit about, and you can't legislate morality. I tend to agree here. You can't create an entire set of laws that drive morality because the morality side is driven from the heart. With the laws, you can deal with the actions of others, and in those, they can inflict consequences. But it cannot make a law to change the way that you think. We can create deterrence. In some countries, there's a death penalty for murder. Not so in others. Even in America, different varies from state to state. But as an act, murder continues despite the deterrence. It's a matter of the heart. And as we dive straight in this first topic, this first case study, you've heard it said, don't murder. Then I say, don't even hate. I have to take a brief detour here because it's always been a challenge for me. Because I've heard in traditional churchianity that, of course, Jesus, he did away with the Torah. That never sat well with me. And this sermon, it played a very big part in that. Because I was told that the law was too onerous, too difficult. Couldn't be kept. Of course, now I realize the flaws in that. And then I notice an even bigger crack. Because it actually makes the law easier. Follow me on this one. I can go an entire day, even a week, a month, heck, a year, and not murder anyone. I could probably go so far as to say that I haven't even thought of murdering anyone. So I'm thinking with that, the law is pretty easy. But then Jesus says, and of course early in this section, he says, I'm not doing away with the Torah until the end. We're not there yet. But now he starts with the heart of the matter. And he gets into hate. It's the real reason behind the act, right? That rule, that instruction, God's wisdom. Remember, in the whole not murdering thing, the world just went from black and white, not murder, to this now, don't hate. We just went to a very blurry gray. Because hate, that's an uncomfortable word, and we'll do our best to wiggle out of it. We'll find all different reasons to say that our negative views of others, any others, does not really fit into the hate column or that hate category. But then Tim and John talk about the expectations that Jesus is having by doing right by others. Because Jesus says we have Torah as the base, the foundation. There's even some fences to help us not cross over into the not so good territory. Yet he, at the same time, he says we need to not just don't, but we need to do right by others. And from his first example, and I think this was a well thought out beginning point, because he says, let's address hate. Laws are not enough. You cannot, again, like we've said, legislate morality. You cannot legislate the heart. It's that we need to change. We need to grow up. We need to mature. We need to see the truths underneath in the foundation of Torah, the doing right by others. And when it's viewed through that lens, that hate part, well, then it's a rather large and it's an obvious thing to address. Here it comes. We like to dislike because it gives us, just cause to treat others without respect. Yeah, I said we like to dislike. I'll bet we try ever so hard to wiggle out of putting that into the hate column, the hate category, that dislike. But I think if we really deeply, truly are honest with ourselves, we can see that our dislike, it's the seed of hate. Yeah, I said the seed of hate. And I think the word seed now brings up more visual imagery. It's stories in Scripture, the sowing of seeds and the reaping. I like to think upside down, and I tend to see things from a different perspective. And recently in an Outside the Class episode, I mentioned that the promises of God, they're kind of like a coin. It's a two-sided coin. There's a blessing on one side. There's a curse or a consequence on the other side. We are the ones whose actions will determine which side is redeemed. Will our actions, our behavior, because these are merely outward expressions of our heart. They bring out one side or the other. So in that upside down mindset thought, we have these seeds of our thoughts and the things that grow in our minds. Here's the weird twist. It's the ground we give it to grow. There's a parable about seeds falling on different soils and what the outcome is. It's very good because in the natural world, in that analogy, we get the seed of growth, right? But it's the soil and the care that determine the growth of that seed. And we know that whichever seed you plant in good feeding soil has a very good chance of doing well. Now, back to my point of dislike as a seed. Because I'll even give you that sometimes the seeds that we have might not even be our own directly. We were given to them by others, right? We have seeds that were given to us from our parents, to family, to friends, to society. But yes, we do pick up on our own. And we see examples of parents teaching a dislike for a certain group of people. We have many different words for it, but the same seed is there. Now we decide how to deal with those seeds. What soil do we allow to grow? Remember, the soil will grow beautiful wheat and also grows tares. So what seeds do we not only plant, but then do we allow them to flourish and grow? This little tiny dislike seed, maybe even as small as a mustard seed, it can grow. And from that, it will grow hate. That's about as much of a promise as you're going to get there. But if we were to choose to be different, we would choose to have a lens of doing right by others. Well, that would help us then maybe, because it might cause us to see the weed that this seed is, and then toss it away, toss it into the dry and empty soil or the brambles to then wither away. Just like the promises, the soil and the seed can be either side. The bad seed in good soil will grow, and the good seed in bad soil, well, it won't. Where we put the seed, and in this analogy, the dislike seed, and where we allow it to grow, to take root, even to the detriment of other seeds. We're going to see this principle played out as we move deeper in this chapter, especially as we're going to see it in the following 5 topics. So next week, we're going to get to the do not commit adultery, and we're going to look through it through the do right by others lens and the whole lust thing, because that's going to give us more to ponder. As you can tell, I'm really excited about this series. And tomorrow, we're going to be discussing this part 4 video with my very cool brother, Jim Wern. Then we're going to be exploring even more thoughts that come up along our way together. Remember, in the description is a link to the folks at the Bible Project and a link to the app so you can follow along and see each one as they premiere and all of the additional topics that they discuss. And there's a lot. This will continue to be an exciting and thought-provoking journey in the Sermon on the Mount, because I wonder what we're going to continue to uncover. So, thanks with us tonight with the Sermon on the Mount series on another edition of The Dusty Feet.